say, we're gonna
I
start.
was late, so it's my turn.
Now we can start, Mike. Okay, we're gonna call the Ped Paddle and Paddle Committee to order. First, we'll do welcome and introductions. I'm Andrew Karras, City of Crown Point, City Council.
Mitch Barloga, NERC staff.
Laura Boff, NERC staff.
Gerald Sweat, St. John Town Council.
Shannon Easton, City of Michigan City.
Mark Waddell, Town of Chesterton.
Captain Cooley, NERC staff.
Dave Keaton, General Public.
Very good.
Laura Hannon. I'm from the public health.
Public, very important to us. Thank you for coming. Oh, general public, okay.
Some of the agendas out there that I missed.
Thank you for being here today.
Well, we have somebody. Oh, Laura Hannon.
Okay, very good. So the chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the January 26th meeting.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll support.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, motion carries. Ted,
Yes. Oh, I guess we should go
I pledge allegiance.
with
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Flora. I'm glad we invited you to it.
Yeah.
All right, now we can do that.
All right. Let's see here. We got a few things to get off my chest. So, if you didn't know, we have an app now. That used to be a thing, like over a decade ago, we had an app for that. We finally do. So people have been asking about our greenways and blueways map for quite a while. We're going to reprint everything. No, we're going to have an app. And I've been telling people that for several years. Well, the problem is an app isn't as easy as you think it is because you have to get it created. That's one big thing. The other big thing is to have Apple and Android agree to have it on their platforms, and they finally got around to that. It took them almost 8 months between them both to do it. And also, it's not just Northwest Indiana. We extend into the south suburbs of Illinois, hence the name Calumet Greenways and Blueways, not just Northwest Indiana. Maybe one day that Waterleaf logo will take over Chicagoland. Right now, it is just the south suburbs of Northwest Indiana. So if you go online, you will find it under that name. You will find our map with a handy geocode to where you'd like to go and so forth. We don't have it calibrated where you'll be able to see yourself on the map just yet. Again, we're working on things. We're working on things, and we're trying to get that all accomplished right now. So I would say if you have people looking for maps, and you will have people asking where the maps are, you can please direct them to the app. We hope to print more paper maps next year. We're in lots of transition right now. We have new staff galore happening here at NERC, so we're trying to get our bearings about us. But one of the things we want to get out is not only a paper map, but also one we create in-house. We haven't done that before. We have used the Active Transportation Alliance for our cartography work, but they have pushed that aside and they just said, here, you take the files. And we're like, fine, we'll take the files. So we'll be able to do that in-house now, so that will be hopefully a lot more, a lot easier for us to update the map and get it out on a much more timely basis. But for now, we did have to lift off of the app. The app itself, if you actually go there, you have all sorts of prompts, easy to get around. As you can see, we have the map right there to the right side of the screen. And it does bleed into, there's more into Illinois than that, actually. We go almost as far west as Tinley Park, and maybe even Orland Park. So we worked with the Calumet Collaborative as well as the South Suburban Mayor's managers on making this happen. They provided some extra funding to help us along to get to this point. And yeah, that's where we're at. So again, it's free, it's ready to go, and finally. And so we do ask that if you have questions, we do have a email there to send us your comments on the map itself, and we hope people will do that liberally. That's the idea. And we don't expect the map to be perfect. I noticed several errors myself right off the bat, but that's to be expected, especially the fact that we've been working on it for several years, and several things have happened since then. So new trails are opening up, and this, that, and the other. So looking forward to working with you all on making this and perfecting this as we go along. Any questions?
continue.
Oh, yes, sir. All right, so I also want to bring up to you the Old Plank Road Trail. This is a study being commenced by the Cook County Forest Preserve in conjunction with NERC to study the feasibility of finishing the Old Plank Road Trail from Chicago Heights east into Cherville and possibly Griffith. What you see on the screen is the map itself, kind of a screenshot from the public comment page. If you go to that website there in the upper left, oprtstudy.org, you can get all the information you like on this project. You can even still comment on parts of the plan itself. We are expecting to have public comment and have open houses regarding this sometime later this summer, with a finish sometime in December of a release to the public. And again, it's a feasibility study. There are several parts of the existing corridor that are under consideration for funding. We have funded a segment of the corridor already along the Pensy Greenway from Dyer to Cherville, from Central Park to Dyer. That's in our 2027 TIP once it's approved. And the rest of it is, again, things that we have to kind of figure out. It's pretty clean and free corridor from Cherville all the way into Chicago Heights, and then you get into that mess there where you have all different alternatives because there's a steel mill right in the middle of the trail corridor, so you have to figure out how to get around that and make it safe and accessible for the public. But so that is the main corridor from the Pensy Greenway to Chicago Heights. But if you take a look at the far right side of the screen, you'll see that dashed line. There is a possibility that we could extend this from the Pensy to the Erie-Lackawanna Trail there in the town of Griffith, where they have the confluence of the Erie-Lackawanna and the nearby Oak Savannah Trail. The only problem with that is that we also have a number of railroads in that vicinity too, and yeah, we love railroads, so we have to be kind of careful with that. So that's our work with the Old Plank Road Trail, and we hope to have that study out later this year. Any questions on that one? Everybody's out on the plank today.
Let the record show that David Heinold has joined us from Town Porter, correct?
Town of LaPorte.
Oh, I couldn't,
No, City of LaPorte.
City of LaPorte, yeah, I'm like, oh.
We're messing up on the numbers.
that print is too small for me to see.
It's okay. Town? Yeah, well, Utah was like, wait, Porter?
We haven't had a quarter here in a long time.
Yeah.
Okay, continue.
All right, so we're going to get into the feature presentation of the day. Lots of maps. I'll try not to be too laborious about this. We have our new 2050 plus plan document out for review right now on the website. You can readily access it. I'll have the link at the very back end of this presentation. And this is what we live for in NERC. We live for planning. It's in our name. And we have to do a 20-year forward-looking plan every few years to kind of keep up with the federal regulations that keep us solvent here in Northwest Indiana. So a bit of a background that kind of addresses that. Again, we are required by federal law to update our long-range plan every 4 years. There's a glare coming off that screen. I'm turning this off. Is that going to be okay, Kevin? Sure. Are you sure? I have a lot of slides, and it's just going to be hard to read after a while. So again, we have this update to our long-range plan every 4 years. We have to have, again, a 20-year horizon. That is why it's a 2050 plan. We are well within our 20-year horizon, as you have heard. And it is our update to the 2050 plan. We did that back in 2019. We like to keep ourselves kind of a 30-year head start when we actually redo these plans. And so in another 4 years, we're going to be doing an overhaul. And that may be 2060, it could be 2055, just depends how we're feeling at the time and what the public would like to see. But right now, we are still in the 2050 window. We have 4 major focus areas based on our 2050 plan: connected, renewed, united, and vibrant. There's a map over there on that far wall that has it all broken down in a matrix and talks about that in great detail. So we're not looking, again, to reinvent the wheel. We thought the wheel looked great 4 years ago, so we're just trying to add value to it with this plan. And we want to provide practical and measurable solutions to what was proposed in 2050 with this document. So the components are pretty straightforward, okay? We have 7 chapters, very straightforward. Of course, everyone needs a good introduction. And then we have these 6 areas of focus: active transportation, which I will talk in detail about today, Then we have climate and the environment, freight, land use and housing, roadways, and transit. Very straightforward. And what we do, again, we pull down these goals and objectives that we talked about in 2050. We try to spread them out through these individual chapters and try to build on them and, again, add value for the public as we go forward here. So, of course, what good plan would have survey results? So we have plenty of that. We did online survey for the 2050 plus plan, and this is tailored to the active transportation part of it. We had this out for several months. I think we had nearly 500 respondents to it, which it sounds good, but again, our region has about, nearly 800,000 people, so 500 is not a great number, but still, we'll take it. We did have a lot of outreach. We were at all the county fairs and did our best to get the word out. But you can see these are where people responded the most. We had the most responses from Valparaiso and the surrounding area, over 17%. And it kind of stares down from there. Porter County did quite well. We, of course, had Cherville, Maribel, and Crown Point coming in just after that. And down. And LaPorte County is second to last, no offense, David. But we had Cedar Lake, Lowell, and the surrounding area coming in at 5%. So it was balanced, as you can see. Obviously, we would like to see other parts of our region that have more population respond. Speaking of our core communities like Hammond, Chicago, and Gary, but you get what you get. So we did our best with that. As for the age of the survey respondents, a nice little bell curve going on here. 30 to 50, that was the prime response rate. We had almost 40% right there. 30%, 50 to 40, 65, and over 65, we had 16%. Of course, under 18, you're at 2.5%, and it usually goes without saying with most of these surveys. So we've got to somehow get the youth more involved. Maybe if we did more of a TikTok outreach, but anyway, apparently it's controversial.
Was there anything done with the school districts at all, or?
We did as much as we could with the staff that we had. I think that's the key here. I mean, as much as we did as much social media outreach as we could. We did all the Lake County, we did all the fairs, David, and we did some events as well. Yes, schools would be a great idea in the future, and we did have my former boss here, Thomas Dow, was very much into working with the Boys and Girls Club and some other outlets for that youth consideration, but it's always a tricky animal. It's always a tricky animal. And they're not really the majority of the riders and users either. So, but as you can see, that's how the bell curve worked. And then when you're talking about transportation of greatest importance, this is a general question about all transportation modes and what is important to people out there. And again, it's a want and a need. Okay, people need road safety. Of course, road safety would be top of your list, but of course they want bike paths and sidewalks. And there it is, right there as the number 2 issue. So trails, sidewalks, bike and pedestrian infrastructure always ranks near the top of any preference survey. This doesn't change either. And of course, you can see there's needs up and down the list. I mean, the only time you see it kind of drop off is truck parking. But otherwise, you can see much of this region has many issues with transportation matters, and road safety always would be at the top of that. Okay, so important destinations for people who bicycle or walk to certain places. Grocery stores, of course, we need to eat. So there you go. It's number 1 on the very left. But we also have different destinations as well, like downtown and parks and trails, and it keeps going down there. We did throw the South Shoreline stations in at the very, that comes in kind of at the back end of it. But you can see the variation is not too different in the actual importance of these. And of course, it's important to see that people would like to access downtowns, retail and shopping areas, grocery stores more conveniently. I think most people live within a mile, maybe 3 miles of their nearest grocery stores in Northwest Indiana, but you try to walk or bike there, you tell me if that's going to work out for most of you. In many cases, it won't. And so those are the kind of things that we're trying to work on here to try to create this network of safe and accessible areas for people to access throughout this region. Okay, so the frequency of participants' bicycle use. So basically, never. We have no bicycle use, unfortunately, comes in at number 1, just over 22%. And then very infrequently, we have the occasional once or twice a month that comes in at 21%. And then we get people like Charles Bradsky in the back of the room at the very back end here, frequently, several times a week, every day at 10.7%. But a lot of people do ride their bikes, as you can see if you add up and you do all your math here. So nearly, you get into that almost 45, 46, 47% of people are riding bikes occasionally, at least once or twice a month. So that's quite a good number. And again, When people talk to me about, oh, people never bicycle around it, well, no, they're not going to if you don't provide the facilities. People do not have death wishes, okay? I get a lot of people laughing when they talk to me about biking on 30 and biking on 41 or what have you, or even walking on it. But you do see people walking these areas because guess what? The destinations are on 41 and 30 and all these other commercial corridors. And people can't get there safely. That's one thing we have to start ensuring in this region and making at least other transportation modes more safe for people to use. And again, take off the reliance on our automobile and help ease traffic congestion overall. Okay, so if people are on those bikes and they actually use them, what do they use them for? As you can see, right up at the top, you have exercise and wellness. We understand that. People like to get a good workout on their bike. And then we have trips to recreation or park facilities, family outings. Of course, people do not ride a bike, come in at 21%, so that's about equal to the last slide. Going on here, touring, social visits, and then we finally get into utilitarian things like routine errands come in at 9.8%, and then we have commuting to work. We have trips to the library or other places, and shopping and commute to school. So you can see it's a pretty low number of people that use bike for utilitarian purposes, and that is what we're trying to change here. Of course, in Northwest Indiana, it's a very difficult issue because, again, the transportation infrastructure does not allow for any of that. Okay, so the most important improvements, when I talk about most important improvements on this slide, this is specifically for bike and pedestrian infrastructure, okay, so that's why it's tailored that way. And as you can see, people need better sidewalks in their communities, right there at the top. Trails, of course, come in at number 2, and you would expect that. Of course, everybody at one point or another is a pedestrian in your travel. You did not get into this room by driving into it. You walked into this building. Okay, so everyone is a pedestrian at some point in their travels. And of course, if people had better sidewalks that connect to different places, like I said, the shopping areas, your schools and what have you, more people would do that. Of course, trails speak for themselves. People love them, but trails don't go everywhere. I tell people at this time that we want to view trails as our non-motorized superhighways. Okay, just like you would not drive I-65 into your house. Okay, you have to come down on a different hierarchy of roadways to get to your home. The same thing has to exist with our non-motorized as well. Trails are great to get throughout the region quickly, but you're not going to get to your house through a trail. You're going to have to go to one street to another street to another street and home. Is that safe? Usually it isn't. You got to put that bike on your car. You got to drive yourself to a trail and what have you. We're trying to make, as I have said, make your home your trailhead. That's really what it comes down to. And it all boils down to it. That is what we want to afford everybody in Northwest Indiana. Either they ride their bike or not, at least they'll have an option to ride that bike or walk safely to those destinations. So there you go. Let's see what else here, any kind of note as well. You know, again, when we talk about utilitarian functions, the middle of that graph with better routes to city centers and shopping areas, well, again, people would like to see it as well, but they don't consider bicycle and walking as much utilitarian as they should, but if they had the infrastructure, as they continue to pound, they would want it. So let's talk about, getting off the surveys now, let's kind of talk about some of the recommendations. We begin at the core, our priority trail corridor network. This is a map that we have been evolving for the last 20 years, especially since I've been here in York City. It's had all those different types of colors. It got a little crazy, so we kind of had to bring it down to earth a little bit here and refined it for our last NOFA round. But this gives you an idea of all the potential trail corridors in Northwest Indiana. Hard to see detail from where you're sitting, but all those blue corridors are either funded or built in Northwest Indiana. All the green corridors are the ones that we're working on now. The darker the green, the higher the priority. We have 2 major visionary corridors in Northwest Indiana, the American Discovery Trail / Great American Rail Trail to the south of the region, and of course right along Lake Michigan, the Marquette Greenway, which is ongoing at this time. And we're trying to work with connecting people into what we're saying here, the core network. Everything you see in blue is our core trail network. And our goal here in York City is to connect more communities to the core network. St. John's in the room, we want to get them to the core network. We have LaPorte in the room, of course, we want to get them to the network. And of course, we already have Chesterton and Michigan City in that network. Crown Point, of course, is in that network if you're in that Kiwanis Trail. So that's important to us, to at least give every community an opportunity to be part of this core, and that's what we're going for. Okay, so as we continue to look at it, we talk about other ideas here about what's on the ground, what's coming on the ground here. We talk about existing trails and planned trails, and we kind of broaden out here to this 2-mile catchment area, and that is analyzed in lieu of how we have developed our philosophy on building trails over the years, because a trail, it can be in a particular corridor, or go somewhere close to where we had planned it. Of course, most of them are going to be within abandoned railroad corridors or utility corridors, maybe along rivers. That's a given, but then some of them aren't so straightforward. We got a trail that's emerging in the port right now that's kind of working its best through the community where where it can be handled. There is no abandoned corridor to work with in the port as per se, but some communities are blessed with abandoned corridors like Crown Point and so on. There's a very prime utility corridor running through St. John that could be possibly utilized just as a matter of mention. But we want to kind of keep those options open and kind of keep it somewhat fuzzy, so at least we give communities the flexibility. But coming off of that, we want to talk about what improvements there are. This is where I stop the presentation and say, this is the change. Again, I've been here, this will be my 20th year at NERC. And during this time, let me get that out of the way. During this time, we have not taken an in-depth look at our roadway network, or those options that communities can look at to improve their roadway network in the sense of building for complete streets. And complete streets are exactly as they sound. Streets that accommodate all intended users of the corridor. Not only the cars, not only the trucks, but we also talk about bike and ped, we also talk about buses or transit if they're available in those areas, and to make them all safe, and to help people get around. But you can't use the same design treatment for every roadway. So we wanted to provide all the communities in Northwest Indiana. We have 41 communities, 3 counties, lots of variety. We have urban, we have rural, we have everything in between as well. We have a great mix, a great kind of laboratory of opportunity here in this region. So we want to present to you all the options that are available here. And so what we did is that we first put upon all these options. We had a preference survey. We kind of got people's feeling about what they thought about these different improvements. And they are all talked about. I'm not here to talk about in detail about each of these improvements. You can look at them. Again, they're in the plan. We do kind of unpack them a bit better. We have things like bicycle boulevards, your standard bike lanes, your green bike lanes, your neighborhood streets. That one on the very right-hand side, the neighborhood street, which is just basically saying that many of your neighborhood streets are just fine for bicycle use. You don't have to put a side path in. You don't have to put a bike lane in. You just have to sign it. Maybe put a Shero or a bike symbol on the road that directs bicycle traffic. But in many ways, these are 30, 35-foot wide trails because they get so low vehicle traffic. And the vehicle traffic that's on there is not only infrequent, but it's slow. Residential roadways have a speed limit of 20, 25, no more than 30 miles an hour. Okay, and that a bicycle can work very well within that corridor. So we got to keep that in mind. You don't always have to build out and think it's going to be such an expensive retrofit. Another series of improvements include the buffered bike lane, which again, these are improvements that have happened over time. They got the bike lane, that's well and good, but the problem is they put these bike lanes in so tight, right up against the traffic lane, that it doesn't make it comfortable. So you put a buffer in there to kind of provide that. We have a calm street, which is called traffic calming. This is where you would put in like speed humps or tables or chicanes where you actually bump into the street. This prevents a street from just being a straightaway or a drag strip for a lot of vehicular traffic. You know, and again, you've seen this happen time and time again in communities. They put stop signs in, they put in the radar, they tell you you're going too fast. Well, that's great, but then when they go, the people come back and they still speed. So the thing is, you got to work on the actual physical design of the street. That will slow people down more than anything else. Traffic calming is what we call it. And then off-street separated lane is an option. We have the side path, getting into a side path. Side paths are good when you have long stretches of roadway where there are no driveways, because again, the more driveways you put on a side path, the more opportunity for conflict between cars, and we get into that in detail. And then we get into more side path treatments as well and how to deal with that in those particular contexts. We talk about a cycle track, which is basically a trail installed in a roadway corridor. So it's buffered, it has 2 ways of traffic right there. We see that right now on Dearborn Avenue in Chicago. They just installed the cycle track on Lake Street in the Miller neighborhood of Gary. It's working out pretty well over there. And this little thing called a Woonerf. And of course, the Dutch have all sorts of different ways of doing things, and that's really progressive. You're talking about a street that is, you just have a street and people can walk and bike and drive their car all within the same corridor. I'd say it's incredibly dangerous, but it isn't. Because again, when the car is going down there, they have to look out for these things. It slows them down. It's called friction. But again, probably far too progressive for what we're doing, but we'll throw it into the pile. Now, not only did we talk about the types of design treatments that you can incorporate within your particular community, then we actually talked about the roadways themselves and what design treatments actually work on your particular roadways. Again, far too small for you to read, but here we talk about all the roads that are involved in Northwest Indiana. They include the country lane, which usually is a wonderful avenue for bicycle riding without any question. Then the rural country road, the principal country road, the assembled local route within communities. Then we get into the biggies, the urban collector, the arterials with excess capacity, the major arterials in our region, and finally, of course, trails. Trails speak for themselves. So when we get into all this, we talk about, I'll just kind of single out one here, which is a major arterial. You know, we're talking about very high volume here. And of course, when we talk about infrastructure, those design options that I talked about earlier, we're talking about shared use side paths, we're talking about advisory signage, wayfinding with line identification. Of course, the more separation, the better, because you have not only a lot of traffic, but a lot of traffic that's going fast. I think an idea here would be a Route 30. Route 30 has a gigantic right-of-way, okay? And it can be worked on. Again, I always say, I have an engineer. You can engineer about anything, okay? You really can. It just comes down to, is there money available and is there right-of-way available to make it work? And with a route like Route 30, there is plenty there. And then money-wise, again, you're talking about a side path. Within there, you don't have a lot of driveway cuts in most of that stretch. It could be worked out. But again, it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of research to make that happen, and a lot of different improvements with crossing traffic and what have you. But again, Route 30 or Route 41 or Broadway or what have you, these are where the destinations are. And this is what we want to kind of focus on, but not just those routes themselves. So let's get into some other ideas here as we talked about. And this kind of goes back again to the design treatments that I talked about before, about incorporating like a bike route or bike boulevard. This gets into just more discussion about these particular things as well, cycle track, side paths, and trails. So what I wanted to now get into really is the proposed active network itself. So we have had trails on our brain for many, many years at Mercy, for good reason, because people love them and we got a lot of corridors to work with. But again, that is not the full answer. What we need to do is create this network, an active network throughout Northwest Indiana. So what this map shows you, what you could make out from where you're sitting, are many of these red lines. And they're different colors, and there's some other colors in there as well. But these red lines, okay, when you break it down, and we have broken it down in this plan, we have them all defined in this matrix, which I can't go through because there are 48 of them that we identified. There are 48 particular routes that we identified that get people through this region safely, or can, if the right infrastructure improvements are brought to bear, okay? And so we take the time to identify them, and it's going to be our job at NERC to do what we do best, advise and inspire, because we can't tell anybody what to do, but we can help them at least think through these things to make their communities safer. So, and I'll get into some details in a moment here. So let's talk about one particular route, just to kind of give you a flavor of what I'm talking about. So this is Lake County, also some in northern Porter County as well. Lots of different routes going on here to get people through the region. One thing I do want to mention in this map, as well as the other maps in the plan that are like this, those red routes are trying to get you around the heavier routes. Okay, yes, Route 30 could be an option, 41, but we also have many parallel routes that could get people through the region just as safe without having them conflict with those particular roadways. And so that's what we're trying to highlight here primarily. I think one of the roads right there, this is a corridor that will connect you from Dyer, Munster area all the way up to the Chesterton Portage area. It is outlined in detail here. It's utilizing Main Street in Dyer and Munster. It talks about different treatments on different segments of road, and that's what we're talking about here. The street segment is all the way to the left of this, and then it breaks it down. Where is it located? What type of street are we talking about? What type of mileage are we talking about? Do we have enough right-of-way? What is the lane configuration? What are the adjacent right-of-way? I mean, we get into this in great detail. We talk about the feasibility of those particular segments, what design treatments that I had talked about you earlier in this presentation, what can we bring to bear within those segments, and then, of course, the recommendation of the infrastructure on the very far right of the matrix as well. And that happens 48 separate times. Okay, that's just one route. That's just one route. And it starts by improving Main Street as a complete street, and it connects eventually to the Oak, Savannah, and Prairie Newland trails, okay, in Gary, which of course is just a straight shot into Chesterton. at that point. But at least it gets people through this region safely from those communities, because right now, we have a problem for people living in Munster and Dyer to get into the eastern part of the region. Sure, they can go north and south, Pensy and area Lackawanna, but how do they get over? And that's what we're trying to bring to bear, that we have to utilize the streets that we have on the ground now, because we want, again, to make your home a trailhead. We don't need you to drive to different places, we would like you to bike safely there. We talked about others as well. This is right here for David and one of the cockles of his heart, the route here in LaPorte County, a particular route that we identified from Valparaiso all the way into the city of LaPorte, connecting our two county seats. And again, this is a route. Okay, this one is taking off from Valpo via to LaPorte via State Route 2, and you can see the detail that we have put into, and I say we, our consultant that we work with, put into some great thinking here to make it happen. Again, I can't walk through this with you in detail because I can't even read it, and I'm sitting right over it. But at the same time, it just shows you the amount of detail and the amount of attention that we have given every community to kind of bring to bear to your own segments, and to think that over when you're doing your improvements. Every community has a capital improvement plan of some sort or another. So when you talk to your public works departments, you give them this idea, and hopefully you bring it to bear for your future planning in your particular community. That's the idea here. So, there you go. We talked about the comment period now. We're still in it. We're going to be taking comments from the public as well as all of our clients until May 5th, probably a little longer for our municipalities. The full plan, as I said before, is at our website, NRPC.org/NWY2050. It's actually 2050 plus, but I think you can get there that way. You can submit comments online, or if you prefer to send us a letter via snail mail, that's great. Thank you. We'll take that. And we are looking to have the TPC possibly approve this in July at this point, and the full commission to have it approved in July as well. We are dealing with some conformity issues, dealing with air quality matters, and I'm not going to even bore you with that right now. But it has pushed it. We thought we were going to have this all approved next month in May, but at this point, it's going to be a most likely a July approval date. So I really appreciate your attention. Thank you. There was a lot going on there, a lot of slides, a lot of show and tell. But again, speaking as an active transportation planner, it's a very exciting document. It gives us a lot to go on, a lot of inspiration to move on from, and so I hope you also share in my enthusiasm. Any questions? Gerald.
So the details of the different plans and the trails and things like that, are those within the 2050 document?
Yes.
Okay, and so that's a pretty large document. Can you give us a shortcut of how to get to that particular section?
Well, that particular section, that's a great question. So what we did, as I said before, all of the chapters are broken out and they have their own PDF. So you can go straight to it. You don't have to worry about going through the whole document. You can just go to the active transportation chapter and you can find it readily within there.
Okay,
So
thank you.
it's a 500-page document when you, so good question. David.
It's a lot of good videos too.
Thank you, thank you.
I like this. I was actually looking at that.
Keep the light on?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, he's very happy. He's our proud videographer.
But actually taking A Street a little bit further than just a bicycle boulevard on a portion of that, so I saw that.
Okay.
And
And that's what we're looking for comments in that.
went above that. And next week is actually the no parking ordinance second reading.
There you go.
So it's very favorable. So.
Oh, good.
No, I really appreciate the funding for this. Otherwise, how do we get updates in terms of bike routes and trails?
Well, again, when the plan is delivered and finally packaged and approved in July, we still as a staff have to sit down and figure that out. We have all the we've got great recommendations for freight, great recommendations for transit and land use and environment. We as a staff really have to kind of figure out how we're going to make that accessible for all. Where you're not taking a fire hose and like, whoa, because there's a lot of good stuff in there. We really want the leadership of the communities to absorb it as much as you can and at least digest it and understand it. So we're working that through. Just getting this out to y'all right now has been a bit laborious because we are a bit understaffed, but we're finally catching up to that. And again, we brought some great consultants to bear. We hadn't done that before. We had a consultant to our 2040 plan, one consultant. Now we had 3 consultants do this plan for us. So working on different parts of it. So it's been a great enterprise.
Very good, Mitch. Great information, valuable information.
Thank you.
Are you gonna handle pedal too? Oh, go, yeah, no.
Yeah, go ahead,
Yeah.
Shelley.
I've been a resident of this area for almost 70 years.
Oh, wow.
And I recognize that people, have gotten into the habit of moving around the way that they move around for their needs. My question is about, you said, you were to inspire, and I wanted to hear a little bit about the thinking behind the inspiration for the conversion, because I see that as a great challenge as well.
Well, what we try to do at NERC overall is to bring best practices to bear for our communities. Our communities are very busy. They have a lot of everyday things they've got to maintain and take care of. And we have the ability to kind of rise above that, to kind of figure out what's happening throughout the country, bring them to bear here, give them ideas to work with, and in many cases that has happened. Of course, some communities are already kind of ahead of us. In many cases, we're ahead of them. It all depends. But that's how we work here. And again, these plans that we put out, there's value there in the sense of pulling things out and adopting it for their own plan purposes. And as a community works, you have your comprehensive and your master plan that feeds into your zoning ordinances and your subdivision ordinances and all the other types of documents should come down off. And we're here to work with that comprehensive plan part, to give them things that they can feed off of, so they can say, hey, we're linking into the regional network here, we're adopting NERC's trail plan or your transit plan and everything else. So I think that's how we bring value, and that's how we do our best to inspire. Again, we don't have any legal authority. We can't tell Chesterton, you do this or else. Now, at the same time, we do have our own money, and we can do that with that, but that's up to them to take it or not. They can be like, I don't want to deal with you. But if they deal with us, then we can tell them a few things about that. And this plan does go into those funding pots. The guy behind you, Charles Bradsky, runs the funding program for us. And we put out a methodology, and that methodology is based on much of what we do in this plan. So it has to connect. So we do our best in that regard. We put out about how much million a year for transportation? 30 million a year. So that's nothing to sneeze at. And that's what I find this.
So in other successful communities, I know Tucson has a great bike route,
Yep.
but in terms of local groups that touch people's hearts and inspire them to get on a bicycle and ride around, is that something that's fed into the community so that when this is available to each, people are just really wanting to engage?
Yeah, it's basically activism, so to speak, or advocacy. And we're a huge fan of it here. I've been trying to work with groups for years. Different communities have kind of taken off on their own advocacy. Valparaiso has a great pathways group. I think LaPorte has a citizens group. And we've had one in Crown Point doing pathways. And then there's a larger group in the region called South Shore Trails, and unfortunately the representative's not here today. So it has happened, and what we do our best to work with advocates. Of course, our clients are our communities first and foremost, but we try to do that balance and make sure that everyone gets the right information to work with. But again, you hit it on the head. We only get so far as our officials, and the officials are elected by the people of the community, and the people are going to have to be the ones who advocate this. So we're trying to provide tools for them as best as we can. But again, we're not an advocacy organization in that regard. We just don't have the staff to do that, but we would love to work with more. We do right now with the paddling group. Northwest Indiana Paddling Association has been very successful, and we've been helping them with plans and working and connecting them with communities, and we hope to do more with Bike and Ped.
I think it's great to know that there's this overall vision going on
Oh,
that
yeah.
people might not realize day to day.
And it's our biggest thing. We're at the county fairs, and the first thing we ask, you ever heard of NERC? Nope. I think we should have a survey about that. It'd be like 95% nope, and then we can talk, and they're like, yeah, wow, that's pretty cool. It's like, it is pretty cool. That's why we're here. And thank you for coming today. Appreciate it.
Okay, let's move on to pedal.
This will be Charles. I'm bringing him up. Tips. It's got tip news. Let me just preface this by saying I invited Charles to talk to you a little bit about the tip because a couple months ago, we went through, actually at our January meeting, we went through a very laborious meeting to set aside all the projects in the last tip. I'm sure some people like to know where they're at. So go ahead.
That was February 28th.
Sorry, February 28th, of the TPC, yes.
I'm not gonna go as long-winded as Mitch. It's in limbo. ago. We've had a air quality conformity issue. EPA has given us new metrics. They also gave us a new formula. And then on top of that, we are using some new data from that our consultant is using. So between those three things, we do not meet our air quality metrics, and we're not the only ones. There's 4 different MPOs in Northwest Indiana that are going through the same issues. One of them is in a lot worse condition than we are. So basically, the EPA is going to go back and relook at their numbers and give us new metrics. But that's federal law. So they are going to have to go back and change federal law to get our new metrics. So we are hoping that'll be done, and then once they do that, in order to do that, they've got to do a 30 or 60-day public comment period. So we are looking to hopefully get those new numbers and be able to run those new numbers and make sure that everything is still good by July. So hopefully in July we'll have the new tip before the commission. If not July, then September. So now anybody that has a new project with funding in 2024 or 2025, we are amending into the 2022 to 2026 our current tip. So that way those projects can still move forward. Most of the projects are dealing with out years, 27 and 2028. So we've got plenty of time to work on those. But for the most part, that's what's going on with our tip. Not a whole lot. Kind of in a holding pattern. I've got to correct a few things and then resubmit the tip, but it really doesn't matter until July.
Thank you for that update. All right, if no questions, we'll continue with Next Level Trails program update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you've been following, the state is ready to finalize their budget, and the governor might be approving it very shortly, and hence terminating the current session of the legislature. Part of that was an original ask for $50 million in the Next Level Trails. That was slashed to $30 million, and that's what's going forward. We tried our best to try to get some of the legislators to reconsider, but a lot of things got slashed. So that was one of them. Again, $30 million is nothing to sneeze at. We're very happy about that. And we're hoping that the DNR will have a application cycle probably later this year. Again, Next Level Trails, it has 2 flavors. It has a large flavor, which is $5 million max request, and a local one at a $2 million funding request. And we have received both types of grants in Northwest Indiana previously. As I said, the Marquette Greenways received quite a bit of money, but so have local communities as well. So we will certainly keep you up to date about when that next cycle commences.
Trail counters.
Trail counters. We're counting trails. We got a lot. So there's a few people in here, actually 3 of them, that are on the trail counter list. And I'm going to stand for this one. So what we have done is we have worked with the communities to buy a whole fleet of these new high-tech trail counters. And when I say high-tech, these are about $4,000 a piece. They're about this size, okay? They're innocuous, pretty easy to look over, which is what we want. They count traffic on the trails either way, go this way or go that way. We have just delivered a whole bunch of them, and we're activating them at this time. And I'm only bringing this up to you because we're going to have another round commencing next month. We have some more money, some more federal money to work with. What we're asking for is 20% of that cost from the communities for trail counters, and we hope that we can install them. We are going to have 29 of them installed this first go-around in about 12 or 13 communities, so that's a pretty good spread. So if you're interested in having your trail networks counted and getting ideas of who's out there using them. The counts come in for a wide variety of uses, and at least it's letting people know that, hey, people are out there using it. And of course, letting you know when they're using it. If you're seeing a lot of activity at 3 a.m., you might want to know why that's happening on your closed trail, things of that nature. But usually it's for good reasons, like you want to get grant money for more trails and what have you, and signage and everything of that nature. So we will be offering that yet again. Any
So
questions?
is Michigan City in the 13? We ordered 2.
No, you said no.
What's that?
You said no this first go around. So we'll come
No,
back.
we ordered 2.
Did you order 2?
Well, it's like 2 years ago.
I don't know. We never got your money. So we'll talk after the
Yeah.
meeting.
No,
Because I think what happened is you said 2, then you backed off, said we don't have money. I'm almost remembering that.
No, we want at least 2 right now.
You'll be first in line because you haven't gotten any yet.
And then my other question is NERC going to collect this data
Ah.
regionally?
Yes, so what we're going to do, you have to remember, we have like very Neanderthal counters out there right now. And I mean, you got to go to the counter, open the box, make sure the lock isn't broken off, go in there, shoo all the spiders away. Then you got to plug it into a shuttle, bring the shuttle back to the office, download the data. Not these. You just take your phone and boop, that's it, you did it. So we're looking for every community to do that yourself. And we'll give you those counters to do that yourself, and you'll plug into the mothership with all the others. So again, this is what high tech brings to the table. And so that's the big difference with these counters, that they're very easy. And battery life is 3 years, 2 to 3 years, so you're not in there much either. So, and it's a lot easier for us to maintain and keep an eye on. But yes, we're hoping that the individual communities will take the time to maintain them.
Would this be like a monthly data collection?
Yes, we would ask your crews to go out there at least a month to collect the data. Again, boop, that's it, pretty much. And we would like you to do that every month probably every month of the year, because people are out there. We'd like to see what our winter counts are as well, to let people know that, hey, you should be plowing your trail. People are out there. But at the same time, you could, I tell people if something happens, you have a year, you have a year of storage in on the memory, but monthly would be great. You bet. And we know the ports
Did he get his money?
Yeah, you guys need to get
Parks
one
get
too,
their
yeah.
money?
I gave one to Mark. Mark does have one. You might want to talk to
Good.
Mark. So I don't know where he's going. You better talk to, he hasn't talked to me yet, so,
So do we install them?
yeah, Tyler got one.
We have 1 or 2?
One. Yeah, I think Tyler got one. You maybe you got 2, maybe.
I'll double check, but you
Talk
said
to
you
Tyler.
Tyler, you dropped them off?
Yeah, he's already has it.
Okay.
So I'm waiting for his location and your location. I talked to Mark right away to see if you guys can calibrate that with Jesse.
So
I think-
we're supposed to install it.
Yeah, it's
Does it tell
easy.
you where it's at?
It's third grade shop class stuff to install.
Put it on post.
I mean, your public
Do
works
it
people,
tomorrow.
yeah, your public works people like, don't, it's one of those things I don't even want to tell them how to install it because it's so easy. It's just, so it's easy for them to install it, and I've already had successful installations in both Griffith and Sherrville, so no worries.
Do
And-
deer trigger these?
What?
Deer.
Oh, yeah, everything. You got to make sure that they're away from trees or cars because they'll pick everything up. And yeah, Bambi will set it off, but that's what, again, if you're having 2 a.m. counts, you're probably thinking it's Bambi that's making an appearance. But again, that'll work itself out.
Yeah, we have a segment of our trail that the deer use, like, I'm a deer. There's a whole part of them because
Well, there's applications for that too, to get into wildlife corridors or what have you.
Geese
Kind of-
set them off?
rabbits.
So, good news on counters.
Very good, yes, that's gonna be some great data coming shortly, and hopefully within the month. Yep.
Hey, paddle.
Do we have the paddling, any paddlers here? No, we don't have them here
Okay, that'll be on our agenda for next month.
today. Yes, sir.
Announcements, updates, and upcoming events.
Anybody wanna do a project update? Anybody have project updates? No?
We're doing our public hearing comment period right now for our Westchester Liberty Trail, so.
Did you have that meeting already?
Yep, we had it
How'd it
last
go?
Monday.
You're still alive, so that's good.
Well, I did not attend, I
Oh.
was informed, but I did not attend.
So Mark, what is that trail?
Westchester Liberty Trail, phase 3. So, 40 people showed up at the facility for 600. So, 20 against the project and 1 for.
Really? Yeah.
To
Could've been
pay
worse.
a portion of the trail, not the whole trail, but a portion of it. So, interesting. So they're taking the comments, fire construction point's gonna provide responses for the environmental document.
Any other, yeah, go ahead, David.
It's not really a project, actually I have two. I mentioned the A Street project. Wednesday, we did the second reading for the parking ordinance to establish, for 4 blocks, it's a one-way bike lane on A Street from 10 to 14. It's gonna have a 2-foot, white line separation there. It's basically taking a parking lane, turning it into bike lanes, 2-foot separation. And then 14th to 18th is gonna be a fully separated 2-way trail, 4-foot mailboxes there, just like we did on 18th Street. So that'll be a good connection to the schools and 18th Street Trail.
Yep.
And then we're also putting in sidewalk around the cemetery where there is none. So a lot of kids walk through there down A Street. So I think it'll change the way A Street is kind of viewed as more of that. I liked how it was in that plan, in terms of a corridor. And then the second thing I have is our trails plan. We're doing pretty good on that. Very happy with the response that we got, survey responses, and the public workshop that we did. We did the walking tour around downtown, the bike tour last fall. Really good weather for November, so.
Yeah.
We're gonna have our public workshop here in May 18th. We're going through the priority routes and all of that, and recommendations. Looking to get that adopted in the fall.
How's your chassis doing?
Haven't heard much.
It's being built.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's being built.
Phase
It's
2 is
almost
being,
done.
yeah,
Yeah,
right.
the railroad section is the only part that is not yet, but that's gonna take some time.
How long is that extension?
It's a mile.
Okay.
It cuts
And it's-
through the neighborhoods,
Yeah. And it has that section of the
Concrete.
railroad, yeah, a lot of
fully
concrete.
concrete,
Yeah.
2 sections.
I
Yeah,
checked
pretty
it
good.
out, yeah, nice.
It's actually looking really good. They got all the ramps in pretty much.
Oh, good.
Couple blocks left. Working on J Street, in the section to right there.
Very good.
Anything else? Do you have anything else? University staff, they just need some water.
It's weird.
If there's nothing else, our next meeting will be Thursday, August 31st, same time, same place. And else, thank you to mention the NERC staff for everything that you do to make make the region a better place to live, work, and recreate in. We appreciate it.
With you guys.
Appreciate all these updates. So with that, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
This meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Oh,
I did.